I think some people can join us soon, but let us get started with an exciting hour coming up. So we're talking about analytics, and just to get started, basically a few points for our attendees. So there's a little bit of a video, so hope you can hear it and see it.
Welcome to Harbinger's flagship interactive webinar, Power Hour. Select the right speaker for audio output. Test your speaker from audio settings. If necessary, join the webinar using your phone. Use the Q&A panel to share your questions. This webinar is being recorded. Attendees will receive the recording. Let's tune in.
All right, that was short and sweet. So let's get started. Just a brief introduction about me. I'm Prashant Khambekar. I am Senior Vice President at Harbinger, and my current remit is that I head the business of HR software. So, we have been doing HR software for a long time, and I've been associated with HR for a long time. My background is that I have studied in the US, I've studied in India, and I've worked in India, and I've worked in the US. So I have a fairly good and rich background. But right now our focus is on analytics, so let's proceed. Today we are going to talk about HR analytics, people analytics specifically, and we are going to try to understand what are some examples, how can you benefit from HR analytics, what are the steps that you need to do, what are some things that you should avoid, what is the strategic benefit ultimately to you and your team that would arise from embarking on a path of analytics, and what are the ways in which you can go forward. So today I'm joined by a very good set of experts. So first is Chris Radvansky. Chris is the principal consultant at RAD Consultants, and he was previously the vice president at Magnet. He has a very rich background. So Chris, you talk and tell us a little bit more about the exciting background that you have.
Absolutely, Prashant. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to Harbinger for having me and my associate here, Dirk, that we'll get introduced to as well. But yeah, Chris Radvansky, president and founder of RAD Consultants, and really focused on contingent labor analytics. So those folks that are non-employees, that are contractors, that are freelancers, that are temps, whatever terms that you want to include within them, that's a very large portion and growing portion of the global workforce. So really making sure that companies out there are leveraging this workforce, understanding the volumes, understanding cost structures, cost savings opportunities as well, how are suppliers performing. So all that different pieces of information, they can be measured and therefore they can be improved. So that's really what RAD Consultants is looking to do. Partner with companies that are leveraging this contingent workforce and really make sure that they're making better decisions that are driven by data. So again, Prashant, hopefully that was good. And again, thank you so much for including me here.
Oh, you're most welcome. And then Dirk Jonker. So he is the founder and CEO of Cruncher. He's based in Boston. And previously he has had great experience working in Amsterdam. Dirk, one of the things that strikes me is that, you have an actuarial background. So how did you get on and start your own company and all of that? That's quite exciting.
Thank you, Prashant, for having me and for organizing this webinar. Yes, indeed, I was actually awarded Actuary of the Year. I want to take you back to 2008. I was working as an actuary in New York, and the global financial crisis was unfolding. And I saw that companies had to make huge decisions, very complex decisions on their workforce in a very short amount of time. And these decisions were made by the CEO, by the CFO, and HR was nowhere in the strategy room. So ever since, I'm on a personal mission to really empower HR to drive business conversations with insights and with confidence. And that was the start of my people analytics journey. And it earned the name of Data Dirk, as many of my friends call me. So Crunch is basically a people analytics platform that helps larger companies around the world with people analytics.
All right, wonderful. Okay, so attendees, you folks can enter your questions in the chat, and our experts will be happy to answer them. But first, let's put the spotlight on them, and let's get this conversation started. So, Chris, if I may start with you, what are some generic examples of people analytics, HR analytics, and how have they helped either your organization or the organization that you work with?
Sure. Thank you very much, Prashant. I would say within focus, again, my focus for the last decade plus has been within contingent workforce. That includes statement of work activity, but also staff augmentation. Folks come through staffing suppliers, folks that are coming through an employer of record, so they've kind of been self-sourced and identified, but they want to engage with that contingent worker. But when you're dealing with the type of population, you need to make sure you're optimizing 4 different things: cost, quality, efficiency, and compliance. Now, cost and quality, those are always going to be top of mind. They want to make sure that folks are coming in at a market competitive rate, and also that they're going to perform admirably and to the top of the manager's expectations. Efficiency, you want to find them quickly. You don't want to have an empty seat for longer than you need to. And then compliance doesn't really get people excited, but it's really a big part of HR. And therefore, it's a really big part of HR analytics as well. So if you can figure out ways of measuring, of capturing that kind of information around compliance, around those 3 other items that I mentioned, that's absolutely critical. Now, one thing that I've engaged with in the past is saying, okay, what is the cost optimal way of engaging with a skilled worker? Should I be sourcing them through an SOW, through a contingent labor organization, through an FTE? Maybe I do want to hire somebody to have on board for the foreseeable future. Now, there's a lot of different considerations that you have to put into the mix here, and therefore, there's a lot of data that you need to collect. You need to understand compensation. You need to understand statutories in your given location that you're looking to source those workers. Even benefits need to be considered. Supplier markups if you are going to go with a staff augmentation population. Now, if you're going to go with SOW, then you're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to divert that liability or that responsibility to complete this project to that supplier. But what comes at a cost with that? So all these things are related to HR analytics, HR data, compensation, finance. It's all interrelated. None of this really can exist in a silo. And really, when it comes down to it, once you do get all that data together, then you need to come with a recommendation. You don't want to just say, hey, I have all this data. I have a massive database. I've tied it all. I built the semantic model. You need to come with a business-driven recommendation, and that's what HR analytics can really enable for you.
Right. Yeah. So ultimately it is the business goals that drive our entire quest into analytics. Dirk,
Yeah,
what would you like?
If you're going to build some kind of infrastructure like this to repeatedly come to the table with a recommendation, you need to make sure that you're speaking the language of the stakeholders. So ask them questions up front, not say, hey, look what I built, and then all of a sudden Mr. Mark Greatly. So you got to do that up front.
Dirk, what are some other examples, please?
Yeah, so I think many companies are currently in a massive transformation, often driven by changing market demand or a push for innovation. And I would love to share one quick example because I think it's inspiring for the listeners of this call. So one of our clients was actually in a massive transformation. They had to grow in one part of the company and downsize in another part. And the CPO, the Chief People Officer, really saw an opportunity for HR to really significantly step up their game. So we built a strategy based on 3 different priorities. And this playbook you can repeat at your own company as well. So the first priority was really to use people analytics to identify cost savings opportunities, very similar to what Chris just mentioned. to fund this transformation. So you can use beautiful, elegant people analytics to scan the organization structure, focusing on spans, layers, right sizing, SDNA. And advanced people analytics can really help you to identify significant cost opportunities, within minutes. But then you need to validate. And this will take a couple of days. The second priority for this company was basically to enhance their talent strategies. So as they were moving through this transformation, certain skills became more important, and they had questions. Are we recruiting for the skills that we need tomorrow? Are we losing people today with maybe the skills that we don't have anymore? And part of this transformation was also, of course, to have the best talent in the most critical roles. This is also a very beautiful thing. We call this key role, key talent alignment. So that was the second priority, and then the third priority is a bit of a side benefit. But if a company is in such a transformation, there is really an opportunity to upgrade your HR business partners, to really empower them with to get the seat at the table, to drive business conversations, but then empower them with insights and confidence. So long story short, cost savings, enhancing talent strategies, and really upgrading the conversations of HR.
So, Dirk, let me continue on that theme with you. When we talk about analytics, it can be something that is fairly short term, that will help you in the immediate term, possibly, let's say, cost savings. And there can be something which is a little longer term, like strategic planning, and having all the pieces fit together. So since that is your strength, can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, of course. So again, we are really, really passionate about empowering HR to drive business conversations. And some of these conversations with the business, they can be around help me understand what is happening today, why it is happening, but also what will happen. And this many companies call predictive analytics. I've always been super interested in the strategic component of this. So what is strategic planning exactly? It is really empowering HR to understand what drives business demand and how does the business operate in the future, and then basically reverse engineer how many people we need, with what kind of skills, what kind of cost, and do our cost align with future earnings potential. So what I see in with my clients and in the market is a big focus now on this component. Why? Because it's a beautiful way for HR and finance to really work together.
Yeah.
But there is one thing that always goes wrong, and that is that HR, basically, they start building very advanced models, and then they go to business leaders and they say, Prashant, tell me how many, engineers you need in 26, and how many engineers do you need in 27? And these are extremely difficult questions. The business leaders will give you answers, but you will get mediocre data. So a much better way to engage in a conversation is to ask, like, hey, Prashant, what drives the demand for workforce in the future? And then you might say, well, this is the number of projects that we do for our clients, this is the revenue budgets that we have. So those are called business demand drivers, and this should be the start of your conversation. Many HR people, they say, we don't have a seat at the table, and it is exactly because of this reason. They don't understand what the business does. So that's the first start. And the moment that you have that, then again, you can build your workforce plans. There are beautiful Markov models to do this, for example. It is very common in logistics operations. So you don't need a tool like Cruncher. You can do this yourself. But basically building understanding about what drives business demand and how our future operating models of the companies, it starts with that, and then reverse engineering conversations with the business. And what does it mean to the people that we need? And how many people do we need? And then there's many different techniques that you can use. In microeconometrics, you would call this elasticity. If we're going to increase the number of customers by 10%, do we actually need 10% more consultants? Or do we also have a bit of technology innovation? And then everything comes together.
Right.
Hope this was remotely helpful.
Yes, very exciting. All right. Let's come up with a slightly different perspective from Chris. So you talked a little bit already about recruitment and contingent labor, or what are different types of, some specifics that we can get, in that, like what data can I use, as opposed to like what data I should necessarily use, So a little bit kind of like guiding people along the way, if you can do that, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned staffing suppliers a number of times, and within any contingent labor organization, you are only going to be a successful program if you have successful suppliers. So when we work with staffing suppliers, we understand that, okay, they're going to receive open engagements, they're going to submit candidates. Some of those candidates are going to get selected for shortlist or for interview, and then they're going to be kind of become a finalist. Okay, well, what's their submitted rate at? Well, are they at a percent of the rate compared to the rate card? Well, what is the rate card? Well, the rate card is the acceptable low to high range that we're going to have for a budget for this type of a role. That person's going to be around for 6 to 12 months, whatever the case might be, maybe 36 plus months, who knows? But all this data needs to be taken into account. But not only about, okay, how many folks did get selected for an interview, but how did they perform in their interview? Once they get selected to sit in the chair, how are they performing at the 45-day mark, at the 90-day mark? Once they terminated, did they terminate because actually they became a full-time employee? They converted, as we call it. What percent of workers that are sourced through a certain staffing supplier are being converted to full-time? If it's 0%, is that indicative that that supplier stinks? No, it might be indicative that the budget for that department just does not going to allow for adding full-time heads. So all of these different data considerations need to be taken into account with the business, the anecdote, the experience from the people that are actually operating the contingent labor program, the IT organization, the staffing supplier, what have you. So all this stuff, I heard on recently that it's great to be data driven, but you need to be data focused. Data driven means you almost ignore everything else that's happening around you. Data focused means that we have people that are within HR, that are within the executive leadership team that understand data, that are comfortable with data, that can leverage data in addition to leveraging their own experience. So really, I talk about suppliers. We have staffing supplier scorecards. You have hiring manager work quality feedback about individual workers, but also how happy am I with the program, with the contingent labor program, or with the HR program, to take it to a more macro level? Consolidate hundreds of different survey responses there and say, okay, how can we improve going forward? How can we leverage what is seemingly unstructured data with free text feedback? How can we leverage maybe generative AI to structure that into a couple different levels, and then say, okay, given all the feedback from these high volume managers that use our program frequently, this is how we need to change. This is how we need to communicate that to our suppliers. This is how we need to manage change. This is how we need to modify the system itself to reconfigure it to require certain fields or certain things like that. So a lot of different things to be taken into account here when it comes to examples within recruitment and again, specifically contingent labor.
Yeah, so like, what about skills and learning? Because we're talking about contingent labor, would we kind of like brush that under the carpet, or how do you is that a consideration? How does it work?
Absolutely. And one thing I was going to mention later is about a skills-based organization. I'm not sure if folks have heard that buzzword out there, but it's been around for definitely the last 12 months or so. And being a contingent, having a contingent labor organization, you're going to constantly have new engagements, new requests come up that, hey, I need this type of worker, I need that type of worker. If you have a relatively legacy full-time employee population, it might get a little bit stale if those folks are not supremely motivated to learn the new skills that are out there. They might say, okay, we're going to augment our current base with the folks that have these new emerging skill sets. So absolutely, skills-based organization is absolutely critical. It helps organizations focus on how do I achieve the goals that we've set up in January, in February, and make sure that we can check those boxes come November and December. You're not going to do that with the same skills that you had for the last 18 months. You need to constantly upskill your own FTEs and also look to the market for the contingent population to say, okay, we're going to bring this person in because they invested in themselves to learn these emerging skills.
Okay. All right, so let's get started with like kind of like the basics, that maybe our attendees need help with. So the first question is like, okay, there are benefits of doing all the analytics. Where do we start? Is the data available? What do we build up, build upon? So Chris, can you talk about that?
Sure. One phrase that we all know is garbage in, garbage out. But I like to use quality input yields quality output if you want to be a little bit more glasses half full type of approach on it. But ultimately, we do need to make sure that the data that we're receiving for these downstream analytics operations, it comes in clean. Now, it's a widely shared fact that 80% of a data analyst or a data consultant, whatever you want to term it, 80% of their time is spent scrubbing the data, really bringing it together, making sure it makes sense. If you have abbreviations, if you have periods, if you have commas and LLC, and the L has a period, then another L period, then another C period, and oh my gosh, it's so much fun. But that's the little things that can be taken care of upstream. So again, you work with your software, you work with the configurations that you can put in there, and therefore all of a sudden we're going to be much cleaner, and that 80% is going to go down to 60% or 20%. Now within the contingent labor programs, there are tools called a VMS, a vendor management system. And what that is, it's responsible really for bringing all the data together, all the requests, all the invoicing, all the onboarding, all the offboarding, bring all that information together in one cohesive unit. However, that is really good from a transactional standpoint. It's really good operationally to make sure that we're compliant, make sure we have some level of visibility. But then there's an SOW where that is just a very, very long PDF at times. Maybe it's 2 pages, maybe it's 200 pages. That contains a heck of a lot of information within it, but it varies from one to the next to the next. And at the same time, this SOW population, because there are some headcount restrictions out there, there's layoffs, of course, that are popping up in the news and our LinkedIn feeds all the time. So therefore, companies are increasingly going from full-time and staff augmentation headcount to SOW, staff statement of work. And now if they're going to do that, they need to do so compliantly, but they need to do so in a cost-optimized way. There are companies within the generative AI space that are saying, okay, we're going to, instead of having, Bob and Sally going into these PDFs and extracting all the different key fields and then opening up the next PDF and pulling their hair out because it's totally different fields from one PDF to the next. Again, there's generative AI companies out there that are extracting that information and comparing it to the transactional system. So the data is easily available. It depends on what kind of governance structure that you have set up, what kind of systems and technologies you're taking advantage of.
Okay. Dirk, what can you talk about? Like, so, I think Chris partly talked about like external to the organization. What data would be available inside the organization, or it's not easily available? What's your view?
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about HR conferences. I think the next time that we go to HR Tech or to Transform, you will see thousands of HR products. So there are so many products nowadays that measure who you are, how you feel, what your ambitions are, what you've learned, what your skills are. So the data is out there. And to Chris' point, not all data is great, but there is a great start. So what many companies lack is a bit of a data strategy. What kind of data am I going to use in the first place, and what are basically bonus data points? So what we typically start with is payroll data. And why? Because this is checked every single month by you, by me, by the accountant, by the controller. And if you bring up your payroll slip, like the payroll statement every month that you get, you will see that there's tons of data points that are very relevant. For example, I know the salary, I know my cost center. The salary strip was approved by my manager. Hey, I have a hierarchy. It says what my work location is. It says something about my gender. It says something about my position title. So having just this information, which is kind of quality good, I can make headcount reports. I can compare different pay slips to another and say who joined, who left. Hey, here are my hire rates and my attrition rates. Because I have my salaries and gender information, I have my salary pay gap, gender pay gap. If I know how many people I have in finance, I can start doing SG&A analysis, not only on headcount, but also on cost. So there is a wealth of information on payroll data that everyone has, that is really, really good, and that is a great starting point. Then the data strategy that I just talked about thinks about what is the next data point that I'm going to add to this. And this could be around performance potential. This could be around skills. I'm really happy that that you brought up the topic of skills. I do believe, and I'm fully agreeing with Chris, that skills is really the future, but it requires a very solid job architecture, because you have to map your current jobs to an architecture. And this is typically where companies are not so strong yet. And therefore, the mapping to skills data is very difficult. And therefore, the results that you get out of the skill mapping are okay-ish. It is a direction of travel, but it's okay. And the last thing I would like to say is data doesn't need to be perfect. Let me take you to an example of elections, national elections. You know, in October, in November, everyone goes out to vote again, and there will be exit polls. The percentage of people that are surveyed through exit polls is less than 0.1%. And still in the morning, they can predict kind of who won the elections. Now imagine that HR doesn't have 0.1% data quality, but maybe 60 or 70%. This is 600 or 700 times better. This is good enough. This is really good enough. So have a data strategy, start with payroll, depending on the questions that you want to have, add more pockets of data, and reasonable data is more than good enough. Don't get trapped.
Dirk,
That's my last thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Don't get trapped to say like, we can't do anything because we don't have data. We have to clean up our data first. Listen, your data will never be perfect. It's an excuse to do nothing. And that is not acceptable anymore.
All right.
I agree.
Okay,
I would say that one thing you mentioned
Chris, what were you saying?
Yeah, one thing Dirk had mentioned about job titles and skills is that, well, it's, you know, the skills taxon or the job title taxonomy is not going to be really great. It's just kind of okay to map the skills to the job roles. And I would say that's definitely the case. When I have historically looked at companies' job titles, they're all, well, no, our job titles are unique, and therefore we want to make sure it's called this, and the job description is this, and therefore, boom, we're going to be different from everybody else. But at the same time, they want to be benchmarked. They want to say, how much should I be paying for this role? Well, you named your role Purple Samurai, and therefore we have no idea because you've intentionally given the wrong label and structured it in a way that is not benchmarkable. So companies really need to figure out, how can we get out of our own ways? How can we be unique, but at the same time leverage the insights that we can get from the marketplace? So that's one thing I would say about job roles.
There is, by the way, a very easy way, a tip that I can post in the chat. Data science can really help you. So if you, for example, have free text. I was with a client this week, and they said, we have free text job titles. So you have sales manager, manager sales, sales NDR, etc. It all means the same thing. Data science can really help you to narrow this list down and to make suggestions like, hey, these roles look similar. Why don't you use this title? It's called Lebenstein distance, and there's very elegant mathematics that is open source available. You clean it up in a day.
Okay, Dirk. So so yeah, definitely, you said that okay, we have the data and therefore we can use it. So what is the preparation at the start that you need to do? Is it just a matter of like getting some data geeks to work on the data, or you have to like reach out to stakeholders, or you have to have goals? What is the right way to prepare?
Eminem sung a great song, one shot, one opportunity. And that is really what I believe. I always encourage people who start with people analytics at companies to really think startup. So what does it mean to think startup? It means that you have limited budgets, one shot, one opportunity to get this right. And you need to earn basically your place within the company. So there is no time to build a big data lake. There's no time to clean up all your data. you need to really balance short-term wins with long-term investments. So what I would do if I would be part of your company, I would pick one small topic that we could be successful with. So basically a business development topic. So this could be, we're losing too many good people, or we have too many layers in the organization and we need to delayer. What's the cost opportunity? Pick one of these things. And then see if you have reasonably enough data to basically solve for this, and try to be as startup, as scrappy as possible. To within 2 weeks, basically show this is the art of the possible, this is what we can do. And with this, you get karma points. And karma points allow you to maybe get a bit more investment, or get a bit more time, get a bit more attention from executives. And this is how you build up. It's like a startup. So that would be my absolute #1 advice. But I'm sure, Chris, you also have some great tips.
Yeah, first of all, I take umbrage with Prashant calling us data geeks. Dirk, he's just coming with haymakers and then taking us out.
No,
it is good.
But I just want to be be respectful of our audience, and they may not all have like a data viewpoint in their head. So how do you slowly convert them? So, yeah, go ahead, please.
It's all good, Prashant. You and I are buddies, and I was just about to say I did a time check here, and I'm like, oh boy, Dirk and I could probably nerd out on data for the next hour and a half here. So by no means do I take offense here. But yeah, absolutely. When you're trying to prepare your company and say, listen, we're hearing it from Chris, we're hearing it from Dirk, we're hearing it from Prashant, we actually need to do something. Yes, you do need to go from 0 to 1. So what is the best way to do that? Yeah, I do agree. A pilot type of a program with a value-based proposition can be a good way to approach it. But you need to have some folks that have a real reason, have a motivation for doing it, and also somebody that is going to take an interest in saying, all right, I can use Excel, and I'm interested in learning more. I'm interested in taking either an Excel class or watching a YouTube video for 60 minutes that so many people are kind of resistant to. Little things like that. How can I get from 0 to 1? It's not a massive time investment. It's not a massive financial investment either, to get a small win, to say, hey, this process is now a hell of a lot better than it was. So really invest the time in the people, identify those folks that are willing to upskill themselves within your organization. And really understand, okay, well, have we built anything elsewhere? A lot of times these companies, we exist within silos. We're comfortable knowing the people, knowing the processes that we work with. Start asking questions, start looking beyond that current silo that you have, breaking down the barriers. You don't need to start at square one if another group is already at square 50, if that's even a thing. So really think about across your organization, how can we stand on the shoulders of other groups? How can we understand, maybe there is a consultant out there that can set us on the right direction, like Rad Consultants, maybe. I'm just throwing somebody out there, who knows? But think about these different ways in which you can get from that 0 to 1 to save you dozens and dozens of hours a month, going forward.
Okay,
yeah,
let's continue.
That's a great point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to ask. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It's really about showing quick value fast, which allows you for further investment. So this startup mentality is really, really important. And I love the example that you gave, Chris. There's typically very data savvy people in supply chain logistics, in finance. And it's a great way to partner with these colleagues basically internally to build something in-house. I always advise people to build something in-house first, because this does a great thing related to the startup culture. It helps you to create product market fit. People analytics is not about analytics. It is not about mathematics. It should never start there. It should always start with, what is that problem that the business is, straight up in a meeting and say, like, listen, if you can solve this for me, then, you're going to get a bit more investment money from me and attention. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So continuing on this theme, right now there is a lot of buzz about artificial intelligence, and especially generative artificial intelligence. So I guess Dirk can go first. What is your view? Like, is artificial intelligence like a necessary part, or what role does that play?
I think there is a lot of blah, blah, blah in the market around AI, if I'm completely honest. IBM came on the CNBC, I think it was 5 years ago, and they said, with 95% precision, we can tell you using Watson, who's going to leave the company. Everyone knows that human behavior is very difficult to predict. So first of all, we need to be realistic about the expectations and create realistic expectations. So I do think that AI can really help us, but in ways that we maybe didn't think about. So generative AI, I truly believe in this. So in Cruncher, we now build generative AI to basically allow you to talk to your own insights. So I can put on my mic and I can ask Cruncher like, hey buddy, how many people do we have? And why don't you split this by location, show me the gender pay gap, and why are people leaving the company? So there, I think it really makes sense to make people analytics accessible for people who are maybe not so, technological savvy or have not had a data science background. So it bridges the capability gap. To use other parts from AI, for example, machine learning or even deep learning, you need heaps amount of data, and you need heaps amount of very good data. And the truth is, many HR organizations are not there yet. You'll see companies like Google and Uber already trying for 15 years to build self-driving cars. They're still not here. Why? Because it is extremely difficult. And you would say we have tons of data, right? We have all the roads, photographed, and we can distinguish traffic lights. It takes a very long time. So even predicting human behavior, are people leaving? Who's the next person leaving? We are still 3-4 years out. And I will close with one comment on this. We did a metadata study because we were really interested in, can we predict who might leave the company? And there are actually 17 factors that are really important to predict more or less human behavior if you decide to leave the company. And 15 out of the 17 factors are not in your Workday, are not in your success factors, are not in your Oracle. They reside in climate surveys, in engagement surveys, often data that companies do not have at hand yet. So there is a lot of talk about AI in HR, but first of all, the data is often not ready. People are not ready. The part Gen AI, that's the part where companies are ready, and which allows you to talk to your data.
Yeah. Okay. Chris, what's your view?
I'm a big AI consumer. I've never written a large language model, but I do keep up to speed with what's happening within the space, and it's really impressive. I think that ChatGPT, OpenAI really takes a lot of the microphone, but NVIDIA just, I think yesterday, released a new model that's available to be downloaded within your desktop, and therefore, boom, you can upload that data that you were fearful to put in the cloud for OpenAI, boom, NVIDIA has it on your desktop. So there's constantly, pretty much daily, there's news that is, wow, oh, just got to keep up with it, and it's nearly impossible. But folks that have historically been not even comfortable around data, when they look at AI, they see, well, wait a second, if I wasn't doing data, I'm definitely not jumping into AI and what the heck all that means. The thing is, you might be afraid of a VLOOKUP, but you shouldn't be afraid of natural language talking to your data set. And that's really what AI is enabling. It's enabling people that used to, 2-3 years ago, there was a term citizen data scientist, maybe even 5 years ago that came up, where technology is going to enable people to analyze their data a little bit easier. And you don't have to go and you get a PhD to really digest your data set. But now with Dirk's point, you just pop on your headphones and ask it a couple questions, and you have the answers that you need. So I think that, from a macro level, it's going to have a massive impact on healthcare, on education. I know that OpenAI is investing in a fusion energy type of a company, with the breakthrough that they had back in 2023 around that process. I think it was November. Maybe it was earlier than that, but nevertheless, I think that the impact is going to be massive on jobs for sure. People need to be curious. They need to invest the time in themselves to upskill, to keep on, what's happening. But then companies, again, with layoffs happening frequently, unfortunately here, there is layoffs. There's thousands of layoffs that have already been attributed to AI. Now that impacts all of us. If you're listening to this, you have some level of interest within HR. And therefore you need to understand how that will impact your own organization and what steps you're going to make as a result.
All right, good. Let's move on to some, again, a little bit of like kind of like down to earth things. So, I'm sure there are lots of tools that are necessary to like, to clean up the data, like you folks mentioned, and to then kind of like, get to some point where you can either do analysis on what is happening or what will happen in the future. So like, are these tools available in the standard HRISs, or you need to like go buy some specific tools, or do you need to like just, give it out to some custom development company to kind of like process your data and to generate the insights that you want? So, Dirk, what would be your view?
Let's take a step back to analyze the problem that we want to solve. So I go back to the HR leadership team, and they have all kinds of questions. Why are people leaving? Are we losing the best salespeople? How can we reduce costs, etc.? So the natural reflex of many customers is basically to say, like, listen, we have Workday, we have Salesforce, we have so many data sets. Why don't we bring all this data together in like a database? We layer Power BI on top, and in the first 2 or 3 months, you produce beautiful dashboards. And that is really the route that I would advise all the companies to do. Build something yourself first. Why? Because related to my previous point, it helps you to find product market fit. So this is a word that many SaaS companies use to explain, are we solving for the right questions? But then as you move into slowly into production, then you'll see that the first users say like, oh, Prashant, what you build is beautiful, can you please, I see that we have here turnover, but can you please show the turnover over time and split it by business company? And we also need to split it by voluntary and involuntary turnover. And then the data analytics team thinks like, ooh, we can build this, but give us a month. So they build it, and then the requirements are layered on top of the top. And then basically it becomes a wobbly stone, that you see at the beaches, and it becomes very unstable. This is the moment that HR should stand up and say like, listen, we now know what we need. We built a ton of appetite with the business. And now HR should go to the business and say like, listen, we are just an HR department. Now we need to go to specialized solutions. And this could be Cruncher, this could be Workday, this could be anyone, this could be a bespoke development company. But you need to get to this stage first. Otherwise, there is no ground for any further investment. So start building yourself first to understand what you need, and then go to the market. And at the same time, you build your capabilities, you build your data, and you build alliances, with finance, with the strategy, with sales, with operations. So everything basically comes in a balanced harmony. That is what I would do. Do not go out to vendors right away. Try to build something yourself first to discover what you need.
Chris, what would be your quick view on this?
Agree. I think that's, for me at Rad Consultants, we use Power BI, but we actually have it an engine of 16,000 lines of C# code that are supplanting, or I guess, supporting rather, Power BI instance. So to make sure that we can take data from multiple different data sources, again, being within the contingent labor space, we deal a lot with vendor management systems. There's a couple really big ones out there. But essentially what's happened is my clients are small. They don't have these data teams that they say, okay, well, great, I know that we have access to Power BI because we, of course, are customers of the Microsoft suite. And therefore we have Word, we have Excel. We can just bolt on Power BI and boom, we have it, we're good to go. To start building within Power BI, it's not, it takes some time. It takes, again, an upskill. You know, there's languages, there's called DAX, there's M within Power BI. You need to understand how the semantic model needs to be built. And you start talking to somebody in HR about building a semantic model and they start walking the other way. So there is definitely an intentional upskilling that needs to occur if you're going to start building that for yourselves. Now, for me, I think that if you can engage with somebody on a contingent basis, on a fractional basis, to start, again, pushing you in the right direction. I had a client recently that came to me essentially with a couple different raw data sets from their VMS. And essentially it's like a kid going up to a lemonade stand and say, I have this many. And then you say, oh, okay, I'll take care of this and let's figure out how we can make this work for you. But saying, okay, well, here's what we have. Here's where we want to get. How do I get there? If you work with somebody that is external, that can set up, here's the step-by-step process. You know, we don't need to be here for the next 6 months. We can build this for you one time. We'll touch base maybe quarterly for a couple hours here and there. But, you know, if you can, you know, invest a little bit on outside resources, it can actually pay good dividends there.
Yeah,
Great.
at some moment, right, you run into other side things. So, for example, people analytics is all about handling very sensitive data. So there is GDPR in Europe, and there's all kinds of privacy regulations in the US.
Yes.
You run into authorizations. You know, can you see everything, or can you only see aggregated data? Maybe I can see all the information from my direct team, but only benchmarks from the other teams. This is indeed some. You run into the limitations of your own success, and at some moment, basically, you are ready for a more professional solution, and that is when you can leapfrog. I mean, we recently implemented a very large company, 60,000 employees, and you know, within 5 days they were looking at their own data in Cruncher. But that is useless, I believe, if you don't know what you're looking for, and that is great to find out yourself in conversations with the business.
Dirk, continuing along, like, is it possible to get overwhelmed by the technology, or what would you say? Like, I know you said that we should start off like doing maybe some experiments or some analysis ourselves, but like, you know, not everybody is technology savvy, and so what would you say?
Yeah, we developed an adoption model, which we hope to get into the Harvard Business Review later this year. So it starts with a couple of constructs. First of all, people need to understand and really believe that people analytics seems useful. This is not about getting into action mode, but this is about education, like these webinars. You know, what is the art of the possible? Build an image around it and show how relevant it is to the jobs. So I love the example that Chris gave earlier, you know, connecting pre-hiring data, post-hiring data, or for example, what we do a lot with Cornerstone on-demand data. People move through certain leadership programs. Do we see higher retention, faster time to promotion, et cetera, et cetera? So it starts with this. People analytics seems useful. Then this leads to an intent to use. And this intent to use is really driven by a subjective norm. For example, the CHRO that tells you, listen, we spent tons of money on our workforce, so we better bring in some data to make sure that this return on investment is correct. We are going to build some capabilities internally, and this leads to an intent to use. Coupled with the intent to use is that you also feel that it's not that difficult. You don't need to be a data scientist to start with people analytics. And then these three magic ingredients come together. So you know it's useful, you want to use it, it feels kind of easy, and then it's waiting for an opportunity to use. And these are the external triggers. And this might be, for example, a reorg, that a company says like, you know, we need to find pockets of cost savings opportunities to fund a transformation. How are the spans and the layers? And then you're like, hey, listen, now I have an opportunity to use people analytics. Or To the point earlier made, we want to move into a skill-based planning. Awesome. Now I can connect my internal data to external sources. Let's bring some people in and let's map the skills. And this slowly moves into democratizing insights, and only then you start to bring in strong governance models, etc. But there's a very, very natural flow from it seems useful. So this is education and evangelism, leads to an intent to use, needs to feel easy, an opportunity to use, and then basically you start to take off.
Right. Chris, like, is it all like positive, or are there some negatives and biases that can creep up in the data? And if so, like, what can we do? Are there any precautions we can take to avoid pitfalls?
Sure. Well, you say at the top here, it says what, are there any negatives to analytics, right? You can almost say, well, are there any negatives to visibility? And the answer is actually, if you're a privacy professional, the answer is yes, there are negatives to visibility. There are negatives to analytics. You need to make sure that you're not putting yourself in hot water when it comes to what content are you putting out there? Who has access to it? What questions? Should you even be asking certain questions? I know, Dirk, you're from the Netherlands, and some colleagues that I used to work with say, wait a second, we can't even ask questions about gender, about ethnicity, things like that. So you need to be very, considerate of legal regulations around what data can you collect, can you consolidate. When it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion within the United States here, if you get down to a point where you're drilling into a question and you're able to identify fewer than 10 or 25 people, depending upon the jurisdiction, then that is information that you cannot share with absolutely anybody. So you need to be aware of what the regulations are around data clarity and data content. And then also you need to say, well, what are my assumptions? If you're not stating your assumptions flat out, you're not stating what's included, what is excluded within this population, you could almost be accused of being intentionally obfuscating the truth or what's reality here. So yeah, there's a lot of downstream impacts to decisions that you make at the top. What was good intentions, if it's executed in a wrong way or an inaccurate way or a deceptive way, which can tend to happen, then you need to hit the brakes and really evaluate what you're trying to do. But then it comes down to, okay, well, we need to do this analysis for our client, and therefore they needed it quickly, and I'm going to send it off, and then all of a sudden it's wrong. There's one number in there that's identified as wrong. And then all 8 slides or whatever you've provided over there, the dashboard, then they assume everything is wrong. So as soon as you're providing information that is incorrect in any way, your reputation goes out the window, and then it's a downward stream from there. So enough pitfalls in there for analytics and visibility. And Derek, I'd love to hear your opinion as well.
It's all about building love and trust with your data. Since data is in so many different systems, I truly believe that when HR brings insights to business or to other HR colleagues, there is indeed a natural tendency to say, like, is this really correct? Do we really have 14.6% of our best salespeople leaving every single month? Who are those people? And then basically you want to be able to drill down and in the moment, in the conversation, say like, oh, click, boom, done. Here are those people. Any more questions? No. Then we move to the next. And this is also where, AI can really guide you into what is the next question. We can have all these analytical paths, in a product, to really guide you step to step to the data. But the love and trust is spot on, Chris. It's it is a journey, but it's a very exciting journey.
That's very wonderful. All right, let us see. We have a few minutes left, so let's see what questions.
I think there's a question in the Q&A.
So this question is directed to Dirk. It says, how long will it take for the HR community to get trained in data literacy enough to use AI correctly or efficiently?
Thanks, Oktay, for asking this question. I will do a couple of things. First of all, you need a Kickstarter. So first of all, you need some kind of mechanism that sets the benchmark and shows you, what is the art of the possible? Going back to the maturity model that I discussed earlier, it has to feel useful. So next to my work at Cruncher, I'm a vivid, educator at NYU, at Stanford, many business schools in Europe, where I try to contribute to the next generation HR. And what we did there is we built a HR business strategy simulation, where basically HR is now in the shoes of a strategy consultant and helping a realistic company to understand how they can reduce costs, how they can better find, grow, and keep people, what the true D&I performance is. So having some kind of simulation workshop where HR is now a business advisor, that really sets the expectations. And then the second thing that you want to do is you want to almost use cluster analysis on the users. Some people are really, really advanced. They just say, give me the tools, give me the questions, and off I go. And other people are very early in their analytics curve. And there we need to do a bit more education around, the seam's usefulness in the model. So depending on where you are in your journey, I believe it's the goal of people analytics teams to find out where people are in the journey and almost deliver precision medicine to get them to the next level. But at first, show them what is expected and show how beautiful and simple people analytics can be.
But
Chris,
can I ask you,
what do you think?
do you think that 2024 is going to be like the magic period where people move from not having enough, mind space devoted to analytics to suddenly making that? Is there are we at a cusp or what is it? Or is it going to be like a steady?
Yeah, I would jump in here. I'll jump in here, and I know we have 2 minutes left. I think that it comes down to individual motivation and identity. Are you a lifelong learner? Are you somebody that gets excited about learning new skills? Are you willing to reprioritize how you spend your time? I personally, I'm a huge sports fan. I just unsubscribed from every sports thing that I follow on Twitter. I'm all about AI and analytics now anymore, and HR. How are you going to upskill yourself, find the value that you can drive? Because this is a new world. 13 months ago with ChatGPT rolling out, I know some folks in certain circles will say, oh, that was just another step in the process. But that's really where it became mainstream. And that's really where companies are going to say, I can no longer not have this AI box checked. It must be checked. And that's where everybody around the world in the business sphere and whatever sphere you're in, you're going to behoove yourself in the next several months to start going from that 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 1,000, because this will be exponential.
All right. Dirk, doesn't seem like we have any more questions. Let me ask. Okay, there's
one, I think, in a main chat.
Yeah. If the starting point is identifying the problem worth solving, what kind of people and roles should be hired for HR or for people analytics? So the starting point is identifying the problem worth solving.
Exactly. So this requires more generic profiles than really math profiles. So imagine that you are in the stage where data is still scattered, where you don't really have governance, where the data quality is a bit, funky. Hiring then your first person that did a PhD in artificial intelligence, he or she will last 2 months. Because this person will ask you, cool, what are the problems that we're going to work on? And then business says, oh, I don't know. Okay, where's the data in one nice place that I can start working on? Oh, data is a bit scattered. So if you hire them too early, they will not last. So it really starts with a business-oriented people analytics leader or HR leader that brings the business very close to HR and finance as well. That is what I would do. And later, as you start to build maturity, it's only then that you start with AI experts.
All right. Okay. All right. So this was wonderful. Thank you, audience, and thank you, Chris, and thank you, Dirk. for a wonderful discussion. I myself learned a lot. And it just like all of us said, we can keep talking and talking, and there are so many facets. It'd be probably a wonderful idea to have a follow-up discussion. So thank you, everyone. We'll call it a stop here. And I know there are some pending questions and answers. We'll get them answered from our experts and get back to you. So, all right.